Hi, I'm Selena. Welcome to this week's weekly reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about two books, the first of which is Jade City by Fonda Lee, and the second of which is Breach of Peace by Daniel Green. As always, I am going to be going into a little more detail than some of you are probably going to want if you like to know not a lot about your books, and so I would recommend you skip this video if you're not wanting to know anything about either of these books before going into them. So starting with Jade City, this is an adult high fantasy that is also an urban fantasy because this book takes place primarily in a city. The city is called Janloon and it is on the island of Kekon. Janloon is run by these clans, which are essentially gangs called the Mountain Clan and the No Peak Clan. They used to be one clan, but now they're not. And they are kind of on the brink of a gang war. Traditionally, these gangs control the market of jade and the use of jade, which powers their magic system of this world. But things are a little tense right now, and it seems like things are escalating quite quickly. And we primarily follow one family that is the kind of the spearhead of the No Peak clan. This is a very character-driven book, so it's hard to say anything really about the plot without spoiling stuff, and it's also hard for me to talk about the characters because I could spoil them all day and still wouldn't capture how they feel to read them, and so I really just recommend you reading them. I didn't go through the perspectives like I usually do in a character-driven book, but I will tell you my opinions on the characters because I know people are interested in that. I really enjoyed the characters, and I didn't think there was a single character that wasn't written well, and I also think that even characters I did not like, I still enjoyed following because I thought they were interesting. The one that people have the most thoughts on I've seen is probably Hilo. I liked Hilo. I thought he was fine. I thought he was interesting to follow. Even if I don't agree with everything that he says or does all the time, I still think he's an interesting character to follow. I don't have to agree with the character all the time to like them. He's personable, he's likable. I enjoy seeing him progress. I also really enjoyed Shay and Andon, who are also some of the more prominent characters of the book. I also enjoyed Lan. And I enjoyed seeing their dynamics with the rest of the family, even the members of the family that I did not really like and was mad at. None of these characters really sticks out to me as an all-time favorite yet. I think that I enjoy all of them. I think they're all really well written, but none of them are favorite characters yet. The closest one to someone who I'm really extra interested in is Wen, but I really just have to see where the rest of the series goes because I know that there's someone in this cast who could emerge as a favorite character. I just don't know who it is yet, but the character work is so good that I'd be shocked if I don't get a new favorite character out of the series. The author pitches this book as The Godfather with magic and kung fu. And I haven't seen The Godfather, so I can't really speak to that, but I can speak to the magic and the kung fu a little bit. So the magic, I really enjoyed. It is wrapped around jade, which is basically this substance that when you wear it, it can give you powers. It can give you some people powers. It can give green bones powers. And most people, when they wear jade, if they're not a green bone, can't handle it and can't get the same powers and can't really handle what it does to their system. However, the conflict of this book, one of the conflicts of this book, is that there is a drug on the market that can grant anyone, not just a green bone, the ability to wear jade. And so that means that there could be people who aren't in the clans, aren't some of the green bones of the green bone clans, that are wearing jade and have those powers. And so I really, really enjoyed the jade magic system because I really loved that introduction of this drug that was shaking everything up and shaking up the tradition of the green bone lifestyle. You very much have this tradition that has emerged around green bones and the mythology around them, which was stellar. We didn't get too much about it, but it was amazing when we got some of that. And then there's also this drug that kind of allows that for more people, and the society doesn't really allow for that. So that was really interesting. The other thing that I really thought was interesting about this magic system is that when you use jade, there is a cost. So not for everyone, but some people find it harder to wield jade than others because it's harder on their system than others. And so to see that and to see the cost of this magic system on some of the people that we follow was really, really interesting too. I always love when there's a cost to magic. I think it makes it so much more high stakes and realistic. I really liked the treating of jade almost like a drug itself, almost like this other drug that you can become dependent on, or you can have your system overwhelmed with it and you can go through withdrawals, things like that. I thought it was really, really good. I really like that magic system. I never pay too much attention to action scenes, so I can't really speak too much of the kung fu, and I'm not really well versed in martial arts in general, but Fonda Lee is. I've heard that she is very good at martial arts and practices them herself, and so she takes inspiration from that when she's writing action scenes. I did think her action scenes were good, but they're never going to be the things that are like my favorite things in a book. What I will say is her action scenes are, I would say, more few and far between than you may be thinking. This is not a action book. This is really the beginning of a conflict that is boiling over. And there are moments of action that are really high paced and like fast and high stakes, but it isn't every single scene. And there's a lot of politics and character relationships as well. This plot stands on its own, but it really does take a little while to get going, and it really does feel like the beginning of a much larger plot that we can barely begin to imagine by the end of this book. And so I have no doubt that Jade War will be even more epic than Jade City, less contained, and I have a feeling it will be a little less slow. I personally didn't find Jade City to be very slow. The first half, I will say, objectively, it has less of the plot and action, but I didn't mind that. I thought it was great just living with these characters, seeing Kei Khan, seeing Jun Loon, seeing the practices of the clans and how society is built and the magic system, things like that. I really, really enjoyed living in this environment because the environment was so interesting. And I thought the pacing was good because something is always happening, even if it's not necessarily like in a big action scene. I was never bored with this book, basically. Fonda Lee does not pull any punches, and she is not afraid to make this book brutal, and I really appreciated that. Her character work and her plot work were both stellar. I think she did a great job with rounding this book out with both of them, and it's just a very enjoyable, contained, fun story that can also has a potential to be much bigger. And this also has the potential to be one of my new favorite series. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed Jade City. Moving on to the review of Breach of Peace. So first, before I get into the actual review portion, I'm going to do a slight disclaimer. I just wanted to make it known that I have watched Daniel Green's channel before. I don't watch it quite as much as I used to, but I still enjoy his channel. I don't know Daniel Green. I was not given a copy of this by Daniel Green or asked to review it or anything like that. And I didn't ask for a review copy or whatever. There's no like beef there. And basically, I'm just gonna review this like I review most books, even though this is a booktuber book. So this is a 100-page fantasy novella about, well, fantasy cops trying to discover who did this really brutal murder, basically. I can't really say anything more than that because it is only 100 pages, but that's basically what it's about. We follow 3 characters, and we primarily are in the head of one of them, whose name is like Chris or something. I don't know. I'm sorry. I've forgotten. I literally just finished this book like an hour ago and I forgot already. But yeah, we follow 3 characters, and they're not likable. I don't know if they're supposed to be. I don't really think they're supposed to be that sympathetic. I think they're supposed to be a little sympathetic as like characters, but I don't really think you're supposed to think that they're doing good things, because these are cops. Like, these are cops, okay, in a fantasy world. These are the coppiest cops that ever did cop. I can't put it any more plainly than that. These guys have a moral superiority complex when they actually are like as crooked as can be. They basically like, they casually will mention, this isn't a huge part of the plot, but so I'm not like really spoiling, but they will just casually mention how they like, oh, like bent the rules to get this evidence, or like kind of complain about how they're not allowed to be as brutal as they would like with certain groups of people. It's very copy, and I think it's supposed to be like that. I think you're supposed to be critical of them, but it's hard to tell, just because I don't think the book is really trying to comment on that. And so I didn't like them, but I don't know that I was supposed to not like them. Does that make sense? I don't know whether I didn't like them because genuinely there were seeds planted that these are not good people. You weren't supposed to like them, or I don't know whether you were supposed to like them anyway, and I just didn't because I don't like cops. I think either one is like a valid interpretation. I was very critical of the characters like as people, but I think they were well drawn as their own people. They felt very individual to me. The problem is because I didn't really like the characters, I also didn't sympathize with them, and I didn't really get that attached to the book because of that. They angered me a lot of times and they annoyed me, and that's fine. I'm okay with characters angering and annoying me, but I also just didn't have enough time to get attached to them, I think, and I just wasn't gonna get attached to them because of, like, I just didn't really like their personality, but that's fine. I can read about people I don't really like, that's fine. The plot was pretty basic because it is a 100-page novella, so it really can't have a whole bunch of threads, but I do think that the author put in a lot of plot twists, like as many as could be fit into a novella of the size without being kind of weird. And I didn't see a lot of it coming. I was at times kind of wondering, okay, where is this going? And I think that it went in some pretty cool places. I will say the ending kind of confused me, but I do think overall the plot it interested me enough. It kept me going with the book. It kept me interested. I read it not in like one sitting or anything, but I read it in one day. I listened to it for 2 hours and I was not really bored, so that's cool. There's one thing with the narrative that I don't know if it worked with a novella this size, but I also don't know whether cutting it out would have helped. I don't know. It just, it stuck out to me. It took me out of the story, and I'm not really sure how I would recommend like an author fix this, but basically there's a couple times where the narration slips into omniscience, and in a plot this size, it kind of, there's ways that in other novels that has been done where I've been like, oh, what does this mean? This could have multiple meanings. And that is what happened with Breach of Peace, but it really went the most likely route, in my opinion, with those moments of omniscience. And I don't know what to do about that, because I think if those weren't there, then I could see people being like, well, I predicted this. And I think by having the narrative be aware that, you know, like warning you, like it's like, well, yeah, of course you predicted. The narrative is kind of hinting at stuff with you, but the way it was, I was hoping for things to go a different way, and I felt prompted by the omniscience. But I don't know. I think either way, you would lose some people and keep some people, and it took me out of the story. I didn't necessarily hate the narrative tactic. I just wanted to mention it here. It only happens a couple times. It's not a big deal. In the end, I gave it 3 stars, which is not a negative rating. I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. And I think that if you are someone who likes detective stories, detective in fantasy settings, if that sounds interesting to you, then you may really like this. It's not something that particularly interests me, like in a crazy amount. I read it, I enjoyed it, but it's not something that I'm like dying to read more of after that, you know? I am going to be interested in continuing on with the novella series and anything else that the author does in this world, as long as it's maybe not more detective novellas. I'm not sure how much I want to read more of those just because it's not my thing. But you know, if it's your thing, that's fine. If there's more like different character perspectives or different plots going on, different sides of the world, then I will definitely be following what this author does with those. Thank you for watching this double review for Jade City and Breach of Peace, and I will see you next time. Bye. What?
Just the amount of explaining you did to prove you didn't have a beef with Daniel Green.
There isn't a beef.
I'm sure they thought you had a big old beef with that man. I don't even know who Daniel Green is. oh, wait, no. He's a booktuber.
Great job.
Did you do a YA video?
Yeah.
Yes, I know who Daniel Green is.
Cool.